Welcome back to Post-Op Reflections. We appreciate you joining us today. We got a very special guest. You're not really used to being on this side of the podcast, but we appreciate you coming in with us today, man. I know it's going to be some really powerful conversations.
Looking forward to it.
So are we. Today on Post-Op Reflections, we're joined by Brad Ortiz, a seasoned first responder with over a decade in law enforcement, including roles at Arlington Police Department and Patrol, street crimes, gang investigations, and as a lead defensive tactics instructor. He later specialized in fugitive apprehension for a state agency targeting violent offenders. Brad founded the Uncommon Line podcast to spotlight uncommon warriors in service and business, and now serves as director of sales at Silencer Shop, leading their law enforcement and dealer sales division, serving nearly 9,000 dealers nationwide. A father of three, Brad openly shares his battles with mental health and moral injury, crediting faith and physical wellness for his resilience. Welcome, Brad. I'm looking forward really to diving into supporting first responders through healing and at identity beyond the badge, which I know is important to you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. No, and just kind of like a back history of how we met. So obviously I've been watching your career and everybody, we worked very closely with, your police department before, so I kind of knew of you. And then got to connect with Anna and was just like really blown away by the organization. And then we've got a co-friend, Chris Webb, that's got a nonprofit that I didn't even know the two, and I had been donating to Chris's nonprofit, then come to find out that's a part of R3. And so you just start getting intertwined with this network, and you find out, and again, it goes back to keeping circles small and the good people connect with good people. So I appreciate it.
I agree with the good people thing. And I've found out the more that after retirement, being in this officer and first responder and military wellness space, there's a lot of really incredible people out there doing really incredible work. And what I love the most about it is most of them, not all of them, unfortunately, most of them want to collaborate. They want to work together. There's plenty of work out there. It's not like we need to compete against one another and try to silo, right?
Yeah.
We got to get out there and connect, work with each other, combine our forces and our resources. The more we do that, the better off we are. And one of the really cool things, it's not just seeing the people that do the work, but private sector, these companies that want to step up and be part of it.
Yeah.
And as you know, with Silencer Shop, y'all have been a big supporter. We really just started getting connected, but I see a really incredible relationship growing there where we're able to do even more because of companies like Silencer Shop, and I appreciate that.
I greatly appreciate it, man. And I don't want us to ever toot our horn, and this is where it goes back to when I've started the government section of Silencer Shop and Approach, and we'll get into that later. But I never wanted just what we're doing. Sales can be always just transactional, right? And I always hated this in the LE space. Like so many LE reps, everything's just transaction, and it's just give me the money. I mean, you've seen this running budgets for the police departments. You're getting headhunted for money, and then that's it, right? And so, what other ways, as I build out a program and build out a law enforcement division, could we be impactful? Not just transactional. And so doing things like, obviously just starting a discount program there, which may seem like the smallest thing, may not be the biggest thing, right? But just being able to give back to the individual officer, right? And then, starting the Sound Warrior donation SKU. And then we quickly identified y'all as one of our partners that we want to do. I wish we'd had a lot more money in the coffers right now, which is coming in because of the amount of sales, but partnering with y'all to be able to give back, just, because then it's the sale alone, even that officer just buying something, just having the idea that, hey, we're giving back to those that are hurting,
Yeah.
And, it's not the biggest thing, but every little bit helps. And as we continue to build on that, I hope that we're just truly impacting other people outside of just the sales transaction, the sales pipeline. So
it means a lot that you want to do that because unfortunately, I think a lot of companies, they're just looking at the bottom line.
Yeah.
But you see the companies that care when they actually want to invest in those customers. They don't see them just as customers, as like family. They
right.
actually have an impact. And I definitely want to get into that transition in the private sector because I know for a long time I was interested in that before I retired because like many in our career field, we don't see how we have value there. But before we get to all that, why law enforcement? What made you want to even start the career as an officer?
So it's funny, man. I've been asked that so many different times, and when I had the podcast, I had to ask myself that several times. Like I always knew there was always something about service that was bred into everybody in my family's service, right? My dad, you know, my brother's in law enforcement, grandfather, so on and so on, right? It's just a typical American story, you know. And there just was something about service, right? Originally, I always been into music and stuff, and I always had this business mindset that I wanted to do, and I kind of just fought that off for the longest time. I mean, I had, you know, the typical startup little businesses as a kid and stuff, and I was always infatuated with business, but then it just always came back to is like, well, I just really want to go do this fun thing. And so I went to be a music major originally at a college here, and I did not last long. And it did not last long because once I had to go to the first day and they were like, hey, you need to come in and sing for us. And I was like, nah, dude, I'm a drummer. We don't sing. Like, yeah, I was like, we're not doing that. And they're like, well, that's how it's going to be. You got to join choir. And I was like, choir? Nobody told me this during this scholarship interview that there was going to be choir. So I go into the piano room and she starts singing out chords. And I was like, yeah, no, this is not for me. So I lasted all but 3 months, quickly changed majors that day because I was like, I'm not doing choir. And then just still the burning inside of me was just like, I got to serve. And law enforcement's always been there. Really, it started with the military thing. And I have one regret in my life, and that is like one true regret. I just wish I had joined that. I don't know why. I just like, it's always been in the back of my head. Like I've never, no matter what I've done, I was like, well, not as good because I didn't join the military. So I came back to San Antonio, you know, did what every other cop does. And what I should have done was a business major, but what do we do?
Yeah.
Criminal justice. So, majored in criminal justice and ended up just like acing courses, having a good time. One of my sergeants was actually a cop that, you know, grew up chasing me in Bernie, Texas, you know, when, you know, we weren't running from him drinking in the woods, you know. And I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. And so, really wanted to go into the Drug Enforcement Administration. And this was during, I forget what administration it was, but they went on a hiring freeze. But I interned with them and I was waiting for a spot. Ready to go for PT, everything's passed, just waiting for a spot, hiring freeze. And I'm like, all right, well, this sucks. You know, I was thinking the Mecca's the Fed side. We had an air marshal that was there in the task force. And he was like, dude, you know, I was like, how did you get on here? He's like, you're an air marshal, but aren't you supposed to be up in the sky? He's like, yeah, but I task force out here, and thinking that's what every air marshal does. So what do? Go apply for air marshals. And quickly realizing I hate flying. So what am I doing? So I was like, this makes no sense. And I was like, all right, well, I'm a Cowboys fan. So I applied to Arlington Police Department, got hired there, and yeah, started my career there and knew like, and I was the guy in the academy. I remember like one of the first days of the academy, not only did I meet my beautiful bride, first day was engaged, and I was like, yep, nope, changed my mind. That's who I want.
Yeah.
But I remember like one of the corporals like, look, why didn't you tell the chief why you wanted this job? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, come on, I used to drive fast and kick ass. And I was like, yes, you know, like that's what I'm here for. And I haven't looked back, man. I mean, it was, you know, I had a good career there, some bumps there, but you know, I had a really good career, and like, you know, it's the best show on earth, right? Left there and then went over to the state. I was chasing kind of a fugitive spot. I left, you know, I was in a major case like robbery gang investigations in Arlington, and I was chasing fugitives, and fugitives wasn't going to be opening up anytime soon. And I just like, you know what, I'm gonna go try to do something bigger, right? Which is, we'll get into about like always wanting to chase the bigger thing, you know, never being happy with where you're at. And went over and just absolutely loved the agency I worked for. I worked for a good group of dudes, tight-knit group of dudes, get to work different task forces and everything. And that's what was the biggest tough part about like leaving law enforcement, because I was in such a good spot, you know? So, but again, the best show on earth. You cannot, like, I look back and I think about like, how am I here? First off, but just the stories and the relationships and the pains of struggle, I wouldn't trade any of it. You know?
Well, no, there's so many good things there. Let me just kind of weigh in on a couple of things that come to mind. First of all, yeah, an incredible journey and career. But I want to go back just for a minute. You were an air marshal that didn't fly. So that's
I wasn't an air marshal. If there was an air marshal in the task force that didn't fly.
Okay.
And I was like, well, if he got into the DEA and he's getting into task force, I thought, well, I'll go be an air marshal, get on a DEA task force, thinking that's like a common thing. Well, there's like 5 across the nation that are task force. You know, it's not a big, they're typically flying or part of JTTF. So
yeah. Okay. Because I was picking up on a theme that you were a music major that didn't sing either. So yeah, I was like, right a minute, we got to comb through some of this.
There is a thing there, there is a theme there, but yeah.
I do want to ask you though, what were some of the, you had that entrepreneur as a younger, you said you were there's an entrepreneur mindset. What are some of those startup businesses?
Yeah, I was wondering that too.
Yeah, so power washing's got to be one of them.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
You've got to have a power washing business.
Yeah.
I mean, I can go back to I remember stupid. You remember Beanie Babies?
Oh yeah.
Right. Like I remember having all these Beanie Babies for my sister and mom, and then be like, yeah, okay, we're gonna sell these on the side of the road, and putting up a sign. I've always just been fascinated by business. I don't know why. It's just been, and it's not like I had this burning desire to be business. I had a burning desire to have my own business. And so yeah, I did that, and then ended up starting a detailing business. Ended up doing really good with that. Did that throughout college, and then once I started doing that, and then I went and worked for a retail company, and went and worked for the Buckle for 7 years. And still doing the detailing thing, still trying to do as many things as possible. And
see, this makes sense to me now.
Yeah.
Because I was going to tell you when we started the show that I think you get the award for the best dressed guest for sure.
Thank you.
We got to point out the
boots are nice.
boots.
Yeah, these are my new babies. Well, yeah, I like. See, Jess, these boots paid off.
Yep,
so now, so
yeah, there's a whole lot, but now I see it. That's kind of like buckle attire.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Well, here's the deal. They're being plain clothes for however many years, and you're just wearing t-shirts and crap jeans. It's like now I get to finally dress up and stuff. But yeah, my wife hates it. I will be honest. I do shop. So
yeah,
that's so true though. Like a lot of our plainclothes guys, I mean, they're second to no one in catching bad guys and surveillance and ops, but their attire is so predictable. It's like that. I can tell you, it's a cop right here because he's not no doubt.
Exactly. Yeah. Are you sponsored by Kuhl? Okay, cool. Yeah. But no, it's so the entrepreneur thing, and then getting into the retail space. Then I was actually going to go into management there, and it still just during college and stuff. I'm still in fact, we just got back from Vegas, and they've got a very successful company there, and best friends with the manager there. She ended up marrying my good friend. That him and I were in leadership positions there, and so I got a ton of experience very young with opening stores and the budgets of everything and seeing the buying side. But again, it was just stupid. I was leader in loss prevention for the company for many years, and they were like, dude, why do you, I was like, well, why not? You get to talk to the cops, you're catching a bad guy. But it's always been this constant, through the podcast to getting patents to things, that's just been this constant, but I had to do what I did. And that's why I still do reserve, because I just wasn't ready to completely hang it up, which we can talk about. But
and I love the business. I love the business mindset, because I've always believed that, if you can do police work with all of the difficulties and everything that's just kind of packed into that profession, you've got a good working mind, you can do anything.
100%.
So yeah, I love hearing that.
Cops sell this. We'll probably get into this a little bit too soon, but cops sell themselves short with the business. I just told y'all, just the other day, we signed a huge contract, something I've been fighting for since I've taken over the sales side, and trying to bring it home. And not only is it a big win and a big accomplishment, but you sit in these board meetings or in these meetings with these corporations, and you're just people are sweating the small stuff, or not able to just make these decisions. And I'm not saying I'm not guilty at times to be sweating it and upset, or but I asked the guys but did you die?
Yeah.
And I'm I'm asking this senior VP dude, but did you die really? Is it that big of a deal? And I just said, we just got to make a decision and come up with a plan, and we'll put it in a plan. If the plan may fail, guess what? Nobody dies. Yeah, it may be a few $1 million. I may be out without a job. My CEO's probably watching this, not liking that answer, but but at the end of the day, we're not dying, and we just go and conquer the problem another way. So
absolutely, man. The most important action is the next action.
Just
taking action.
Just taking action.
Yeah.
How many times where you just get stuck in this
exactly
this repetitive feedback loop of just not making a decision? Well, that's where failure happens, right? I tell my team all the time, fail forward. I'd much rather you fail forward than just staying and not making a decision, right? And I'll have their backs. Even failing forward, I will have your back, but I will not have your back if you're just doing nothing, and
and then really just embracing this truth that those setbacks, those failures, those missteps, I mean, those are the best opportunities to learn. That's where we actually grow.
100%.
But it's we get petrified about them when it's just human. We're all just doing the best we can, right? Let's just go through it and do the right thing, and we'll reassess and fall, fail forward, like you said. I love that line.
I mean, you go back to I go back to, when we started the podcast and stuff, I was chasing probably the wrong things, if I'm being honest. Like, I wanted not affirmation for myself, but I wanted it to identify through other people what are attributes that make them uncommon, right? And so that's why I came up with the uncommon line, was the fact that there's so much common in the world. There's common, and it was in police work. It was supposed to be just a police podcast type thing. And there's just so many common cops. And really what separates the other cops from, the good cops from the other ones are the uncommon cops, right? And the uncommon people. Well, the same thing in business, the same thing in life, right? Amongst all this noise, amongst all these people, there's the common, but the true ones are the ones that are uncommon. And that can go two ways. It can be uncommon in a bad way or uncommon in a positive way. And so we were trying to highlight that uncommon in the positive way, and identifying that and starting doing that. And once you start seeing that and you start talking to these people, and then it started delving into the business aspect of it. And then, I started doing another business amongst that, coming up with a patent to sell, and multiple failure points throughout this, right? But it's funny because you could always rely back on, this is the stupidest, and I cannot believe I'm going to say this, but you could rely back on your training. Yeah. In law enforcement. And I'm not talking academy training, because we all know, no offense, chiefs and upper command, but academy training is a lot of BS. Let's just be honest. Like, a lot of that training is just, on the job, right? You're learning from the senior guys and having to make those bad decisions, so to speak, not illegal decision, but yeah, that probably wasn't the smart decision. Well, that's where you really learn, right? Should have gone left instead of going right, but they just carry you forward, I think, a lot more. And that's where I started realizing, I was like, man, cops sell themselves way too short. Oh yeah. And I sold myself way too short, because I am so negative on myself. And then I think that's why I just quit the podcast, was the fact that I didn't think I could go make this next jump. And it came to a point I wasn't ready to leave police work. But can I do this other side, right? Can I grow $100 million business? Can I, the patent failed, I got screwed over here in a contract negotiation, didn't know what I was doing. And then it's like, well, I'm a quitter, right? And so what do we do as cops? We just go back to doing what we do. We know how to do the job. And so, yeah. So it's just.
Well, you were talking about that uncommon trait you see in some, especially we'll focus on the positive side. Were there certain traits or characteristics that you saw over and over in some of your guests that made them so uncommon, or was everybody just completely different?
So that's actually a good question. I don't know if I've actually ever thought about that and thinking that I'm identifying uncommon traits. Tenacity would be, I think, one of those that, there's just always this aggressive tenacity of not settling for failure, but them all failing, if that makes sense, right? And you see so much of, we've had Jason Redman, we've had, one of the heroes from Benghazi. We've interviewed all these people and these amazing, Clint Bruce we were just talking about. And then I would interview just another officer. I would interview now my LE ambassador, Peter Johnson with Archway Defense. And there's just all this common thing of just like failure, but there's just this tenacity of this burning, right? And if you step back and looked at that, it just was the fact that they just rose to that next level and didn't take failure as the option. Right. Whereas I found myself at the time kind of wallowing in the failure, right? And just always living in that failure, and then cascading all your failures over your life, and then just making those your identity instead of just like pressing on and actually like trying to attain the next thing. And you start realizing, well, it's not the people that are stopping you from your growth. It's you in your own way, in your own mindset. And that sounds so cliche because you have all the, no offense to Clint, but all the Navy SEALs out there with their podcasts and everything that are these, have the mindset, have the grit, carry the boats, type stuff. And it's like, at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be that physical, or I think the harder is the mentality, like the mental is a mental game. Like you can have the physical, but to overcome the mental game and positivity and stuff like that is far greater to me than the physical.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I'm reading a book right now by a former Navy SEAL. His name was Alden Mills. It's called Unstoppable Mindset. And it's like you're quoting the book when you're talking about this stuff. It's all
I actually wrote it. It's not his book, so I actually wrote that book.
Are you seeing the royalties yet?
No, I wish.
But it talks about obstacles are actually opportunities. There are possibilities and problems, and about failures are just a chance to learn. And one of the things he says is experts fail more than amateurs try. Yeah, you're going to see people fail over and over and over again, but the ones with that tenacity to continue, they become great at what they do. Where everybody else, they try a couple of times, they fail, well, they don't go any further.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. The ones that we really see rise above everybody else, they just don't give up, man.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And again, like, it's just never settling, right? I was on a podcast last week at SHOT Show, and one of the things I said is like, the question was like, what is your main goal for this year? And I told him it's just to be uncomfortable all the time.
Yeah.
Because like I found myself to make this jump to what I did. I say this, my wife will attest to this, and the ones that are in my close-knit circle. I mean, for me to leave law enforcement to full-time, I had to go to counseling. I mean, it was that bad. I mean, it was like, I did not know what to do, how to do it. And I'm like, here's this opportunity that, I mean, I know very few people, especially in the industry, that are given the chance to go work for a multi-million-dollar corporation and start essentially another business inside that and have that backing and that success of a company. Most of the people are just doing this from startup. So you would think of how many people that I talk to that are just at the jump of this. No, for me, it was just, I mean, it was hard.
Yeah.
And so having that mental fortitude and that ability to say you can do this. And now I look back and I think, you know what, the biggest point for me that made this successful, besides my faith and really my life, was getting uncomfortable, because the decision itself was uncomfortable, right? And just I remember us sitting on the side of my bed, calling the CEO and going, I'll take the job. And then I haven't looked back on that, right? And that was so uncomfortable. And so like this year's goal for me is just, as much as I do, the stupid stuff of getting up at 3:30 in the morning when I have a meeting just give myself uncomfort, because I find myself having a lot more success when I'm uncomfortable and I'm putting myself against the wall, whether that now be sales numbers or having to go out on my first patrol in uniform again, because I haven't been in uniform for however many years with this new PD. And it's like, it's just total uncomfortable, right? Having to ask for help when I haven't had to ask for help. So
get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right?
Exactly.
You have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Half the books I've read, you just summarized all of them, man. That's a lot of wisdom I think a lot of people would take in. But some other wisdom I think people need to hear, specifically first responders, and I'll say from my perspective from the policing world, they don't see their value. I didn't see what value I would bring to anyone in private industry. I don't have that business degree. But then they started naming things. Well, here are things you do or have done for decades as an officer that not only will translate well in the business industry, you're bringing qualities we don't have.
Right.
What did you find was really helpful for you that you learned and experienced as an officer that others can hold on to and say, you know what, there is life after policing. There is life after being a first responder or military, and this is what can help get me there.
Yeah, to me, the biggest thing is like, it's just never that bad. Like, I mean, my COO, my boss now, he'll tell you, he's like, I'm telling you not to worry. I'm telling you not to worry. And I'm like, and I sit back and go, yeah, you're right. I'm not getting shot at. I'm not having to hold that dead baby. I'm not having to do that thing. And that sounds so dumb if you think about it, right? But just being able to press on. I had a meeting with a couple of my team members the other day. I said, this team will lead from the front. At the end of the day, we will make the decision. And it just goes back to, and I left that meeting going, wow, it's literally what we just would talk about in an operation, right? Like, we're pressing forward, we're going through the door no matter what happens, no matter what happens on the hostage rescue, whatever it is, you're just pressing the threat. And so everything correlates. And I think cops don't think, and I'm guilty of this, we just don't ever think that our experiences correlate to the private sector and to, other jobs or other opportunities. And quite frankly, I much rather I look back now, when we start talking about Excel spreadsheets, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. And I wish I had done that in business, in business school, but I much rather have the experience I have than that college degree in business, because I wouldn't trade the mindset and the ability to be somewhat adaptive versus, the person that is just business, that is just rigor, that can't adapt to that because, well, it just doesn't go with that flow chart, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, something else I always would say, people talk about sales. I have no experience in sales. Every day as a cop, you're selling.
It's all you do.
All the law.
That's all you do.
I mean, you're flipping people on drug deals. You were talking to gangbangers. You're trying to get them not to kill you. Everything is sales.
Yeah, you're talking that dude down that you just do not want to fight right now in this moment because you've just stopped him and your backup's on the way, and you're just like, just trying to talk. That is a sales pitch, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's funny. It sounds so dumb to think about, but I'll just think of so many little situations and you know, and some of the business decisions in the last few months where it's just like, I can attribute to anything in police work, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not selling ourselves short because there's a lot of complexity with sales. Like, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I still just, I mean, you get me in a room with the dev team, I have no idea what they're talking about. You ask me to do anything on computers, have no idea, but that's how you lead from the front because you surround yourself with the people that do.
Amen.
And
yeah.
again, what does that go back to? That goes back to police work to make sure when you're finding people on a team and specialize, you have certain guys that are, you know, experts in those areas, and that's how you make a successful team. So
yeah, there's so much of this that really, you know, comes down to mindset, right? Like it's having the right mindset. And when we talk about, you know, our men and women in law enforcement, I've always been amazed that when we go to the police academy, for example, you know, before we graduate, we have the right mindset. We want to protect and serve. We're, you know, at that point, many of us have spent what, 6, you know, plus months, 9 months going through a police academy where you've had camaraderie, you have had encouragement, you've had support, you've learned new curriculums, new strategies, new ideals, new operational planning. You're probably physically fit, you're getting adequate sleep, you've had 3 squares a day. You're really in the best position you've ever been to go on and eventually be successful. But something happens after we graduate from the academy that, you know, we find many times unfortunately we find our men and women after a few short years struggling in all the areas that they love the most. And so I always think that we need to really dig into what happens during that transition. We've all written that letter when we graduated that we're here to protect and serve. And I believe that to a large degree, if not really unanimously, we do hire the right men and women and they are servant hearted and they do want to make a difference. But again, something happens from the time we graduate to in only a few short years that kind of takes us down a path where we cut ties with some of the strategies and techniques and things that have put us in this, you know, in this better, this healthier mindset position. And so I think the only thing that is consistent there is that our men and women consume a lot of secondary trauma. They consume a lot of other people's grief and other people's tragedy. And I think that we haven't paid enough attention to that it's not necessarily critical incidents or crisis that are knocking us off center. It's that vicarious trauma. It's other people's.
yeah.
And so I wonder if, I mean, just in your experience, consuming that secondary trauma, does that aim to knock us off of that mindset that we have to believe in ourselves, to know that there's more?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, you know, there's a couple things that I would say to that. Like, first off, we go into the academy and we're consumed with that academy for that month. You know, for your first 5 years as a cop, right? It's just like, I mean, we'll call it 2 years because I think we're having this back scale of, we're starting to see issues with officers a little bit sooner, you know, in today's climate. And just my personal opinion, I don't have any facts to back that up. But, you know, you're going to the academy. A lot of us, you know, for a lot of people, there's already moral injuries going into an academy. You've had issues growing up, you know, whatever it may be. And I think a lot of times we just push all that down to then go like, yeah, here we are. This is the career, right? And you inundate yourself with this career and it's all you're thinking about, all you're doing. And especially for me, I marry a cop, right? Marry into a cop's family where everybody has a badge. It's in all you consume all the time. And you just keep pushing down and pushing down and pushing down on stuff. And then you start having, you know, these other situations that come up. And I think it's just a compounding thing. And I think what's happening in law enforcement, in my opinion, is like, we're not catching this early enough to where that we can postpone or delay that compounding effect and put some stop gaps in there. And so you allow this to compound for a couple of years where let's face it, the easy ones are the shootings, right? Critical incident happens, somebody's life is lost or taken. That sucks. It's hard. It's hard on everybody. It's hard on the organization. It's hard on the officer, especially more so nowadays because you can do everything right. But it's the harder ones where you have all these little things that are attributing to this that are just building up and there's no stop gaps in there. And then pretty soon it's just that's too much, right? Or it's the shooting that's a tipping point.
Yeah.
Or it's something at home that's a tipping point. So it's a matter of identifying that before, and we can do as much trainings and talk about it, right? I remember going through the academy and like we talked about mental health, but it was just like this shove off, right? It's not truly an ownership of what's happening on the inside. And really, quite frankly, a lot of the psych evals before, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I mean, anybody could have taken that test, you know? And I guarantee everybody that's going through the academy's got some kind of, you know, issue or situation. And those things just come in different ways for other people. You may go into business and it just doesn't evolve into the same way as it is for an officer, but you may have that situation with, you know, a family member that all of a sudden you're dealing with that domestic and it brings back all this stuff. And then what do we got to do? Now we're pushing down that situation as well as the personal situation. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's the stop gaps. Like that's a critical piece. And you know, where we recognize that cumulatively you're going to take on some stuff, and every one of the things that you take on that may be a loss of life call, maybe a fatality car crash, a suicide, or overdose, every one of them has the ability to affect you adversely. And for whatever reason in law enforcement, we've just kind of operated with the assumption that you're going to be all right on those. It'll be the critical incident that we'll support you on. But you're right. We've got to have stop gaps in there. That's one of the things we're doing with checkpoints is just recognizing, hey, you know, when someone goes to a loss of life call, it has the ability to affect us adversely. So just let's drop a quick line. Let's check in on them. Hey man, just checking on you. Don't let those calls stack up on you. I'm here if you need anything. You know, through that motion, you are creating an awareness to the officer that, hey, this is a big deal. I just had somebody who's got some skin on the wall, you know, somebody who's really got, you know, a stake in the game here that reached out to check on me. So I better not minimize this.
Right.
And then that does validate the feelings that I might be having, whether it's from this call or from a previous one. And I think that goes a long way to create those stop gaps and sustain us. I think that's what you said, right? Like just allowing us to continue to persevere, continue to push through, because if not, it bottlenecks and it pressures up, and then we have an issue in our, you know, that may seem insignificant, and maybe it's something in our personal lives, maybe it's a health issue, or we have problems in our marriage, which you know, obviously we have lots of, and all of a sudden we start to unravel, and that's what we've got to address. Is this we come here with stuff, we're going to pick up a lot more stuff. Yeah. We still have a servant heart, and it's a powerful thing. But just put a few stop gaps in there so that we, you know, can kind of get a litmus test along the way.
Yeah. No, and you know, it's funny because no matter what you do, and even if you get help and stuff still comes out. I mean, I'll give a situation. You know, I've been involved in a lot of different stuff, but one of the ones that I most, and I told this to Anna when we were first talking about this organization, one of the most impactful things in my career to this day, and I still just think about, was I responded to an unconscious baby, and I mean I had responded to a dead baby before, drowning in a pool, and I've, you know, many times over, and so in my mind I had already been kind of prepared as an early officer for that, unfortunately, and responded to the house, and the dad had rolled over on the baby, was intoxicated, and so baby was still kind of warm, so I knew, you know, there's still something there. So I pick up the baby, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna start compressions and start working the baby. And I thought I had it back for a little bit, and so calling EMS. Of course, it's a one call that EMS is not fire is not there first. So I'm thinking, and that's what I'm thinking in my head. I was like, of all the calls, here I am, and they don't want to make the scene on this one. And so I start working the baby, and then EMS gets there, and you know, baby's gone. And I just, to this day, like the arms draping over my hand and the legs, and anyways, so fast forward to, I guess 1.5 years now. My wife will have to correct me on that. We're feeding my third child, and we're in the room playing with her and stuff, and she was drinking a bottle, and she starts to aspirate, and so then she goes unconscious and turns blue. And so my wife's freaking out, and so I start working her, ended up bringing her back to life. Wow. And I mean, so much so, and this is not funny to think about this, but you know, my wife was like, I was like, call 911. I said, I'm going to start working her. And I've had a lot of TAC med experience and stuff. So I just was like, stayed calm, start doing this. and wasn't even thinking of baby Gabriel at that point, like nothing at that point, you know. And of course my wife comes in, she's like, what's the number? I was like, 911? Like, no, I know. So, bring her back. She starts coughing, and I just got angry. I mean, just angry. Threw my child's, like whatever that's like where she can do her little makeup and stuff, threw it against the wall, put a hole in the wall. I storm out, and I sit in the living room, and I'm kind of quiet. And of course my wife's still crying, and I'm like, what the hell just happened? You know, kind of like trying to identify, like, I mean, for other people, you may think, oh, you just saved your baby. Yeah, I did. And I can't even think about that in that moment. Like, not even thankful she's okay. I get upset, storm out. And then I just started breaking down because I just started thinking about him. And I start thinking back of that, and her arms were draped over my hands. And I just, like, to this day, I just think of his arms and his legs and limp, and thinking I could save him. And so I go back and I go, you know what? I was just worried I couldn't save her too, you know? And this is 10 years later, you know? Yeah. And it's those things, and you start looking back and start looking in these moments of your career, and you may think the shootings and, you know, seeing the homicides, but it's the other things that you don't think are triggering. And so it was really important to me, because you start looking back and self-diagnosing and going, wow, I mean, yeah, that's a crazy call, but I mean, I've had a baby in the water, you know, and you start thinking, well, all that is just adding up, and eating away at you, and eating away at you, and eating away. Until you don't realize it, right? So yeah.
Well, I think, man, you know, again, there's so much to the cumulative effect that our first responders are, you know, really our military servicemen and women, and all first responders are enduring and consuming. And I think, you know, every law enforcement leader really needs to take note of what you just shared. I mean, here's, you know, a call that you went on, and you remember it, you know, 10 years ago, to the point where it triggers an emotional response. Yeah. And as you know, I've had the opportunity to present on, you know, to law enforcement groups for a while, and inevitably every single time that I present something about the cumulative effect of secondary trauma, someone approaches me after the presentation to share a story about an incident that they were involved in where a child died. And these are horrific events that become part of us. They just become part of us. You'll never forget that story. Right. You know, if you're able to live to be 100, you'll remember it. If something recalls it, something triggers it. And these are the things that we carry. And it's not just the children. There's not like a imaginary line that stops on that child death, when the child when that death might involve an adolescent or a young teenager or a teenager. It continues and it continues, and they're all etched into our mind. And, you know, I almost feel like, you know, maybe we all have a threshold that there's only so many bodies that you can respond to as a first responder. There's only so many tragedies that you can see as a first responder before it starts to take its toll on you. And the fact that we are still here today after so many years of discussion about the emotional and mental health of our men and women, particularly law enforcement, but all first responders, and not doing something to put stopgaps in or something preventative is beyond me. I cannot understand it. It is it's all of it is there, and all of it is taking its toll. And with the right trigger, all of them will create an emotional response. And anyway, I'm very grateful that you shared that story.
The other aspect to it is, it's like I thought in that moment, you know, like, you can see and you can almost sympathize or understand when you have that guy that, and I'm going to say this very cautiously because I don't want to think, you know, do anything, you know, unethical or illegal or morals right in any way, and we all hate those cops. But you get the guy that all this is compounding, and then something happens with the use of force, or something happens at home, you know, in a domestic situation, not right at all. But there's a point where, like, what if I had thrown that and accidentally hit my kid? You know, my purpose was not to hit my kid with a piece of furniture. But you're clearly dealing with something you don't even know what you're dealing with. Like, it literally had, and I'm surprised. I mean, I was surprised at me being able to identify that was the issue, because I literally just, like, saved the baby. My wife's still in tears, threw a piece of furniture, storm out selfishly. And you're like, I had to go like, what is going on? Enough where it was awkward. It was weird. And so you can almost think about, man, and then as soon as it hits me, you can almost understand for guys that are going through this at a greater level that then something ends up having worse where they're getting themselves in a situation. And I'm not making light of what they did or condoning those actions, but you can almost see it, because what if I hit my wife with that piece of furniture and then she calls the cop, and then, it sounds so petty, but imagine this on tenfold, and this is not just Brad's thing. This is rampant within law enforcement. And we just dismiss it a lot of times.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, right? So, not to dismiss any actions of law enforcement or servicemen and women where they've crossed a policy line, or certainly violated the law. But is there something behind the curtains that should be part of that? Whether it's an investigation or an inquiry, like what is behind the scenes of that? I mean, I'll ask you this, Brad, can you tell myself or Neil how many loss of life calls you've responded to in your career? Yeah.
No.
So we can't.
I could tell you I don't like eating Fritos to this day, because for whatever reason, Fritos remind me of the smell of dead bodies.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like if you open a bag of Fritos for me, it's like, this sounds like almost like a sixth sense. I can't have Fritos. Or chili pie or anything like that, because it's just like I instantly start thinking of, right now I'm thinking of the three bodies in my mind, and for whatever reason, and as I make light of that a lot of times, like I joke, and then I'll tell this to just someone that's not a cop, and they're like, wow, that's just weird, and I'm like, I don't know why, but now it's like, so it's something little like that to me we almost joke around and go, Fritos, that's funny, but think about that on a scale, right? Like something so happy that should bring joy, and food, I'm attributing to three bodies, one on the side of Highway 20, one inside of a house off of a Bowen Road, and then the other one off of side of 20 as well, burned up in a car. And I'm like, who else thinks like that? But to us, I can tell that to you, and you go, yeah, that's perfectly normal. And you could probably identify three bodies right now that stuck out in your mind. But to everybody else, that's not, and we shouldn't be okay that is okay, right? And I would never have said this my entire career, because every one of us sitting here knows that at some point in time, we looked at our career and go, nah, I'm Billy Badass. And I can't think like that, right? Especially you're trying on your, the gun belt when you're fresh out of the academy, like, yeah, buddy. But it's rampant. It's absolutely rampant.
Yeah. It's like we all conditioned ourselves to just not be affected by that call and just go back, go to the next call. And in fact, make light, if anything, whether through dark humor or just dismissal of what actually you may have experienced at that horrible scene, just to kind of keep plowing through. And I think the reality is, again, we analyze so many things about policing today, right? We analyze where crime occurs, who it's occurred by, is crime up or down? We want to know everything, our response times and how frequent we're engaged in the community. But for some reason, understanding how many loss of life calls or grief or tragic calls you went to during your career, that has not been part of the analytics that we've tried to capture.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because that's crazy to think about. Right. Typically I would think, especially from the command standpoint, like that should be an easy stat, right? To pull loss of life call, tell me the officers that are assigned to it, give me that stat, right? So the data is there.
Yeah.
Right. Like the data is there, but that's very interesting. I've never even really thought about that.
I felt bad. I never thought about it until Reuben asked me that, and I felt very guilty that I hadn't been tracking that. We are now. That's one of the things we're doing at Fort Worth. And the problem is nobody's really thinking that that's that important. It's just part of the job. It's like Reuben says, they're just routine calls.
Yeah.
That's routine. There's nothing routine about that. Absolutely nothing. Yet we weren't even tracking it to try to quantify the effects of that cumulative trauma over time. We're doing it now. We're late to getting in the game, but we're trying to do better.
But again, you look at so many different portions of police work. Like I remember my first autopsy. You don't ever forget your first autopsy, right? The smell, just the fact that it's just being done so gruesomely, right? To me, that really doesn't affect. I grew up in a medical household as well. My dad, just go see surgeries and stuff. So for me, I could deal with that a little bit better, because the whole medicine side, I looked at that as medicine, right?
Yeah.
Very here's the science of it. But you can tell you what, the one working over at the state, and technically our caseload was, violent sex offenders. And I was so glad I was on the other side of the fugitive side and getting a part of some of the, the CAC investigations, some of the investigations, but having to do what these officers do on the daily basis for sexual assault of a child.
Oh, man.
Looking at all these images, and we're sending people to counseling and everything, but it's not enough. It's not enough. And these guys, I mean, we just one here recently in the Metroplex that took his life, right? And I think we're being very short-sighted in what we're allowing officers to see, which they have to see because it's evidence, that's truly making an impact on these officers' lives for the rest of their life. Because I can go back and I think of the images I've seen and just going, man, I'm glad I get to put cuffs on this guy. I'm glad I get to break out every window in his house. But to be the dude sitting there and just scrolling and seeing this and having to document this or talk to the child is just something that I just don't think we're doing enough to service. And talk about having just shoved down. I could not do that job.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, another atrocity about that cumulative effect and not having stop gaps, not knowing the thresholds, is that when we have that God forbid scenario where a police officer takes their life, often we look at this and say things like, well, they were having problems in their marriage, or they were struggling with finances or alcohol, as if that one-dimensionally is the reason why they took their life, as opposed to a consideration of what is behind the, what does the data say as far as exposure to stuff. So again, we never know these thresholds, and you've talked about counseling and therapy, and I know Neil and I are big proponents of counseling and therapy as a solution for law enforcement, but there's this big space between when we'll actually go. Most of us, won't go until we, the wheels.
Too late.
Yeah, the wheels are unraveling.
Or it's unraveling, right? And I can point to every time that I have been, it's just the wheels were coming off, right? And I'm not saying, and I can say all this. I can sit here and Monday night quarterback my own life and, and think about others, and I don't have all my stuff put together. I am in the bottom of it. I am so negative on myself, so hard on myself. I could be a better dad. I could be a better husband. I make mistakes all the time. So I don't have any of this figured out. But I think we, talking and being open with individuals. And I go back to, who we surround ourselves early on in a career. And so I look back at some of the stop gaps that could have been in place. And a lot of that is self-action and self-assessment of yourself and who you're surrounding yourself with. And what do we do as police officers, right? We're typically with all the rookie officers, we're out there, hungry for all this and just, and probably allowing the wrong people into our lives. And so that's why, I talk with my, my teams and stuff, like, keep your circle small.
Mm-hmm.
In the sales side, I keep my circle small. I'll work with a bunch of different people, but the people that have the inner knowledge, I keep that circle small, and not allowing any of that noise and negativity to compound on that job, because now you're just sharing that negativity and bad decision. And so you look back on that. To me, it's one of the stop gaps is like getting education out to officers to make sure that we're surrounding ourselves with the right influence, right? In and out of work. Whatever that may be, whether that's just going and offloading with a therapist once in a while, whether that's being involved in a church, your faith, family, getting out of this job and not being part of this job occasionally and being so inundated, but setting that tone, that way you have that foundation outside of work. So the foundation isn't work, right? Because I think that's where we go back to, like, people making the crossover into, the private sector. All we think is our foundation is law enforcement. That's all we think. That's all we know. And there's so much more to it, right?
Talk about counseling, and we're big proponents of that. This has kind of been like a therapy session for me, just listening to you talk, because everything you're saying, man, is ringing so true with me. And one of them, you were talking about the way you reacted when you literally saved your baby's life.
Yeah.
Totally opposite of how you would have thought you would have reacted, right? But it triggered, something was triggered when that happened. And man, I had a complete dad fail recently. My son, our youngest, is learning to drive. We were going to school. He was driving. First problem, we were running late. I let us get out of the house a little later than we should. And I'm looking down at our route to see, if we're going the fastest route. And I look up, we're coming into a really hard left-hand turn, and we're going way too fast. But it was so far into it, I knew if I said anything and hit the brakes, that momentum would just carry us off the road. I was like, I got to ride this thing out. So rode it out. We made it through. But as soon as I saw we were safe on a straightaway, I lost it. Yell at him to slow down. What have I got to do to get through to you? And as soon as the words came out, I went, wow, that was intense. Why did I react the way I did? And actually was going back and rewatching our podcast with Brad Hunstable and Cliff Weaver, who's the chaplain, one of the chaplains of Fort Worth Fire Department. And he talked about a situation where he'd had many drowning incidents he had responded to, with kids. And his kids were out doing something he told them not to do, swimming across this pond way further out than they should have been. And he looked out there and said he completely lost it and said things he would normally not say to his kids. And he didn't understand why at first, but it was a trigger because he reminded him of those kids that he couldn't save.
Yeah.
And here's his own kids. Am I going to have to try to save my own kids? And that took me back to where I responded to my son. I don't know how many fatality accidents I've been to. I was in traffic investigations for a while. We'd reconstruct all the fatalities. And I don't know how many of them were kids my son's age.
Yeah.
It wasn't just that I was scared. It scared the crap out of me when I looked up and saw how fast we were going.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just that I was upset that once again he was going faster than I wanted. For me, the biggest thing is with all of his parents, I wanted my son to be safe while he drives. I look up and I'm thinking, I don't know, or is my son going to die?
Yeah.
Is this not going to work? So it's those triggering things. We don't even realize really why we respond the way we do, especially things when we get mad when normally we wouldn't. But it's that compounded trauma. It's those things we don't deal with. It's things we keep pushing down and the things that agencies aren't tracking and trying to deal with ahead of it.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the stopgap, about putting things out there. And leads me to a question as far as your career, because you saw a lot, obviously, like in patrol, being out there doing the job that every cop does, but then you were working with gangs, fugitive apprehension. When you look back and you can reflect on your career, when did you first start saying, hey, this is a point where I needed somebody to check in on me?
Before the academy. So I'll be honest here. And this is where it's like, have I told a lot of my story, even when I'm on a podcast, I never wanted to make it about myself, I've always struggled with mental health, if I'm just being completely honest, like just always have. And not in a way of like, what we all think is like the negative mental health for whatever reason. So in college, well, I can identify in college, let's just be honest, there was some steroid usage that I think completely jacked up my not hematocrit, but my, what am I trying to say, endocrine system, right? And I had some bad anxiety attacks, right? And I've always put a lot of pressure on me, right? But I can go back to when I was younger and having anger, and I came from a great home, right? Like there was nothing that, I didn't have any traumatic injury, stuff like that, we all had our issues, everybody does, but I had a lot of anxiety, and I always look back on myself as like, that was something that held me back and that I was never good enough for anything. And anything I've ever done, I've always thought that I'm never good enough, right? And even in this role here, if I'm being honest, like what's next? Am I doing good enough, right? Yeah. And you look at all these things. I told my boss the other day, we've had the highest quarter, highest sales day since I've taken over. Like, and this isn't just me, like this is a team aspect, but like I'm a part of that. And then we didn't hit one little thing, and it's like, that's all I can think about.
Yeah.
But I go back to, like truly, like, I one night just panicking, was in my apartment alone, blackout, call my dad. I'm like, no clue what just happened. Where are you at? He's like, well, I'm at the hospital. I was like, yep, I got to get to the ER. Start driving my car, nearly wreck my car, passing out again, not knowing what's going on. Pull over at Cornerstone Church. I don't know who I called at the time, if it was my girlfriend or whatever, and go to the hospital, and my heart rate was like 210, just massive. And of course, I had like, everything's going good. Like I got a good job, school's going good, not knowing what's going on. And so I chased, like trying to find out like what happened. And of course they're like, well, you're having an anxiety attack. Well, now you got to take this medicine for anxiety. And I'm like, well, who the F are you, you loser? Like, I don't want to be that guy. So I had this stigma in my mind going into police work. I remember thinking, like, that's why I talk about the psych exam. Like, would I have gotten hired if they actually knew that I had anxiety attacks? And what's crazy is these anxiety attacks never come during the most stressful point of my life. It never happened. I look back and I joked with one of the guys on our podcast. I said, I'm more at peace breaching the front door where I know that dude's going to kill me on the other side than I am at home with the kids running chaotic, right? And kids screaming and stuff. And so I've always had this anxiety issue and taken medicine for it for many years. And, come to find, I've chased what caused it. And, obviously it was probably a lot of steroid usage, and not a lot, but you're just messing with your endocrine system. Like that'll just jack people up. It's funny, the stuff I was taking during my internship at the time was partially illegal. And then I walk inside there and all the dudes at the gym are up on the board of the DEA board. And I go, well, this is an issue. So, but I quickly, as the intern, wanted to start buying drugs from them. I was like, look, I know these guys, they go to my gym, like, let me get my foot in the door. And so anxiety's always been for me, like a thing, and it's been an identifier for me. But I go back to like as a kid, of struggling with my identity of being too dumb because I was that ADD kid that had to have the board around as the way I learn, and so I've always had these walls and had to overcome these walls and put up these walls. So then you get into police work, right? And this is where I go into many of these issues are being had for officers beforehand, right? Like I had a good life, but I had this walk of dealing with severe anxiety and negative self-talk of everything. I wish I wasn't going to tell that to nobody in police work. Nobody was getting that piece of information.
Right.
Nobody's going to I'm not talking about that with nobody. If anything, I'm just going to squash it down further and further. And I thrived as an officer. Like I had a good career. Like, I've made some mistakes. I've excelled. I've gotten to go and do a lot of different stuff. But at the back of my mind, that's always still there. And then dealing with it. And so I go back to thinking about those officers that, we talk about the moral injury that happens on the job. But you have somebody that comes in that has these other issues, whether that be small, minor, major. Well, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire.
Yeah.
And so I go back to telling officers like truly having self-awareness, and I'm the worst at having self-awareness. Like I am the worst. My wife is laughing right now. My family's laughing at right now as they watch this, right? As I talk to other officers. But the more and more that you don't put those gaps in on the front end, especially for those new officers, the more and more you don't try to identify what those are, you're just putting gas and gas and gas and gas. And pretty soon your life will catch fire. For me, a lot of mistakes were made. And, I know I had to write this down and I've never said it out loud to anybody. I've sat with a gun in my hand 3 times. I used to reload ammunition. I used to reload .357. Pulled the trigger one time with the gun in my mouth inside of our office right there on the gray ottoman. Gun went click. And I thought, what in the world? Like, what in the world? I'm a horrible reloader, clearly. So, thankfully. And I look back at those times and nobody knew that.
Yeah.
Wife didn't know that for years. My wife didn't know that. Nobody. She didn't know what I was struggling with. There's plenty of people that are watching this that never knew that. Luckily, the first 2 times were just one time in college. And then, because to me, it was just this identity issue of like, man, I'm never good enough, And then the final time was, the time pretty early on in my career where I just was dealing with some stuff and I just literally thought, it's so much easier just not to live. And I will tell you that there are more officers that I've talked to that this is the norm.
Yeah.
This is the norm.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately for me, or fortunately, the gun didn't go off. I still have that gun. It's crazy to look at. Every single time I open up my safe, I carry it up in the top right-hand corner. And every time I open that gun safe, I smell, I see, I look, I feel, all that emotion keeps racing back, but I allow that emotion to get raced back because I want to be uncomfortable, because there was so much comfort in pulling that trigger, if I'm being honest, because it just is what it is. Right. And so I found myself that I thrive in that discomfort of knowing where I've come from.
Yeah.
Of that, and using it. And here's the deal, I never wanted to make the podcast about myself, so I never really told that story. But if I look back and stuff, it was just me always trying to search for how do I deal with that, you know? And then you start talking to people and you're like, yeah, dude, you know how many pills I've popped, or, you know, how many times I've, you know, racked around in the shotgun, or we end up going to our officer's death, you know? And I say this, and I get a lot of flack when I say this, and I said it on the podcast, and really what I was talking about was me. I can tell you the episode I go back and listen to. I think the people who deal with this, the people that overcome those walls, are far stronger than the people that don't. You know, we can talk about the people that take their life as the easy way. It's really not. It's really not. Because what's not easy is living with those moments and the build up for that. It's tough. It's tough to struggle. And so I tell guys, and I tell people this, and I say this to myself, that overcoming that's the strength. And it takes a strong person to persevere through that. And for the guys that are in the career that are struggling with this in this moment, they're far stronger than they think they are. And so the easy thing is to just put the stopgaps and ask for help. That's the easy thing. You're doing the hard part.
Right.
Every one of them are doing the hard part. They are living their life, and that is the hard part. They're living amongst turmoil. That is the hard part. The easy part is just trying to get the help, or reach out, or have the conversation and face it, right? You're facing it head on. That is the hard part. Well, you were doing the hard part.
Talk about strength and facing it. I appreciate the fact that you had the strength to share that. That can't be easy to share, and obviously something you haven't shared with a lot of people. But I guarantee you we have people listening right now that are going through the same kind of struggles, that want to know, hey, can I make it through this? And I think you're a perfect example. And I'll tell you the most encouraging thing about that story you just told me. You mentioned the first time. You didn't say the second time. You didn't say the next time. You said the final time, meaning that's it.
Yeah.
Meaning that, okay, yeah, this is what happened. This is part of my story. But man, I found something else and I moved on, and that will never happen again.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. Like there's been struggles post that.
Sure.
Like the stuff my family and we've gone through and dealt with, and the ups and downs. And I mean, we have gone through it. And I'll be honest, like there's times where you go and think back about that moment. But what I try to do is I think back about like how strong you have to be in that moment. And I know, because we always say suicide is easy, and it is. Pulling the trigger is the easy thing, right? It is. What I'm talking about, and hope people understand and what they hear, is know the strength it takes to be there in that moment, and all that you've done to fight, and you're exhausted. Well, you still have more, because when it doesn't work out, when the gun doesn't go off, you can go off and do all these other things. You're going to struggle, and you're going to go back and you think about that time. For me, it's a reminder every time I open the gun safe, you know? And I want that reminder. For me, that's how I deal with that, right? Like, I want to know, man, look where you've come, look where you're going, because when you get in that tough moment, I like to think that that's a portion that I've defeated, right? It's a dark past, and it's a past you always have to face and fight. But we don't have to shy away from that, right? And I've shied away for it for so long. I think a lot of people that, first off, the inner circle that know, but a lot of people that know me, that won't surprise them, because they know how dark those moments can be. And I think a lot of times we just want us in law enforcement to shy away from them, even when amongst them getting the help. No, there's no reason to. Like, look at that as what you're persevering through. Look at the struggle that you're going through. That takes far more strength than going to the call with a baby, to pull the trigger when you need to pull the trigger, to go through that door. That takes far more strength. To me, I go back to, that's the area I'm most comfortable at.
Yeah.
I'm most comfortable in that peaceful moment of the team stacked behind me and going, let's go. But I am so uncomfortable in that other. So it takes far more strength to overcome that than it does a lot of times in what we face in law enforcement.
Yeah. That's such an incredible perspective that you're giving right now. I mean, so incredible to our listeners who we know are, many of are in similar places, or have been in similar places, or might know somebody who's in a similar place or heading towards one. The power that's in that space the perspective that you're given right now, you've got more in the tank. You've got 10 times more in the tank, and you've done the hard part. I just have to acknowledge how powerful of a testimony that just was, and what that's going to do for our listeners to impact and change and save lives. And it takes an incredible human being to be willing to not only share that story of difficulty from everything from the anxiety previously and the steps and
yeah, I mean,
it led.
And a lot of it is like you're a constant work in progress. I still take medicine to this day. It's still a struggle for me. I will tell you the biggest, besides faith and family and everything, if people have not researched functional medicine and in their lives and trying to find and diagnose and actually like fine tune your body of course, I'm not like the specimen, at one point in time during all this, I was
You'll be better than kneeling.
so yeah, right. I mean, at one point in time I was 300 pounds and I've come a long way, from that, I broke my back and stuff, but anyways.
Get a handsome beard now. That's a good thing we're good.
But like the self-help version of that and the functional medicine side, it, for me, has been huge, right? So I manage so much of it that do I still struggle with having anxiety? Of course, yeah. It's just, there's times where, and it is the weirdest thing for me. Like nobody will ever know when I'm dealing with it except my wife, and those in the inner circle. But like having the functional medicine side of things and really looking at like diet and supplementation. And for those that don't research any of that, I highly encourage it. Has been life-changing. So there's so much to it of like getting help and reaching out and everything like that. But truly, we are missing the mark when it comes to officers and their functional medicine side, and through the true diagnosing what's happening at the body level, right? For me, didn't have all this trauma to cause anxiety. It ended up being an issue within my endocrine system. And there are so many other ways besides just throwing meds at it, that you can fix so many things and solve so many stuff that can really help our officers become better officers individually. And once you start finding out what's going on with your body, both mentally, and then finding out that there is this chemical reaction, right? Because what we do as officers, we store so much cortisol levels, we hold this cortisol, which then affects all these other aspects of our life, ends up having issues with our hearts and all these things, all the things we know about, but we've been just throwing medicine at it instead of just, working on ourselves, both mental, physical. And then now, like what I really fight for is like people actually getting their blood drawn, like, and getting an in-depth blood panel, not your testosterone level, which half the departments are all on testosterone. And I look perfectly fine, but an in-depth blood panel that tells you exactly what's going down from your thyroid to your brain to everything. And then taking supplementation to fix the small issues in your body will help out so many guys. And it's been huge for me.
Brad, something I'd love to really dive into. You talked about health, physical health. One of the things we're doing at AWA is working with this company, Frontline, and at Fort Worth Police and Fire, they've been doing these super comprehensive physicals that literally have saved people's lives, heart attacks, cancer, prevented all kinds of things from taking the lives of these first responders that had just been killing us for years. And we're actually working really hard to collect data. So not only are we working in the mental and emotional wellness space, we're taking a lot of the physical data that they have on the physical health of these first responders. We're trying to combine that so we can catch things early, prevent things from happening. Something else we do with AWA, we have options for very faith-driven, these retreats, Warriors Refuge, and it's been changing lives. I mean, not only we're saving lives, we're saving souls, careers, families. It's absolutely amazing. And some don't want to do the faith route. That's fine. We have options there too. But we have seen much more profound impact when it comes to taking that faith journey and willing to actually be vulnerable from a faith aspect. How has faith impacted your journey? Because like you said, it's not like you're just cured one day and you never deal with these things again. Right. It's about learning to cope. It's about learning to deal with it. Sometimes that's medication, that's therapy, that's a combination of things. But how has faith actually impacted you?
Yeah. So, good question. It's one of those things, like I've grown up in a Christian household, it's always been, faith has always been around, always grown up in the church. I I've struggled with my faith for, I mean, just all the time, right? Like, I mean, we were just talking about this a little bit ago. I don't know how specific you want me to be, but there was a specific large pastor here in the Metroplex that I would have given anything to catch that case as a fugitive officer, and was begging to get it once it happened because it was a church I went to, right? And then we go to another church and it happens again. And I'm like, just give me the case. And so there's this taint on the modern church that like I've always struggled with, because like I just think that it's flawed. We're humans, right?
Right.
Which, who am I to judge and to talk about that way? Because a church is run by humans and there's going to be flaws. So my walk has always been very, very personal and stuff. Those within the inner circle know that the struggle I've had with that, it's a constant struggle. It's something there, but it's always been a constant, right? At the end of the day, when it's just myself and God, that's who I'm talking to, right? And sometimes that's just me just being Brad and being a complete asshole and venting way too much and putting it all about what is Brad, and struggling with that. But it's always a fight. But again, I go back to something like, to struggle with something doesn't mean that you're not accomplishing something, right?
Yeah.
I'd much rather struggle with it and it be a fight than not have it at all. And the cool thing is, no matter how much I screw up, no matter what mistakes I've made or struggles I have, that is the constant, right? It's always the base. It's always the foundation. And at the end of the day, when you strip everything away, your kids, your family, your wife, job, that call, whatever it is, that's always there. I don't ever try to force my faith on other people. It's probably to the detriment of me. I probably need to be a little bit more vocal on that, of like trying to, share my faith. I'm not one of those that puts that out there as forward facing that I should, right? And that's on me. But it's always a constant for me. And then, especially any time that we've ever leaned into that, and the times that we do, life is just always better no matter what. Like, I don't know how to explain it other than you just know that when you do lean into that and you do face that, and no matter what you're dealing with or have, that's always there. Your faith will always be there.
Well, I'm glad you brought up what you did about like what we have seen these controversial incidents with some of them very well-known, major, very well-respected pastors, because I think that does cause people to have doubt.
100%.
And I'd say especially it seems like the Christian faith is under attack a lot these days, and unfortunately a lot of these people we see involved in these things, even pedophiles, man, which as far as cops go, that's like the worst thing you can be, right? And these are supposed to be the faith leaders, so it brings a lot of doubt. But Tony Dungy is one of my favorite authors.
Yeah.
And one thing he said about it one time, he said, faith is not the absence of doubt. Faith is having doubt, but choosing to believe anyway.
Yeah.
To continue with that struggle to really strengthen your faith, don't let doubts push you away, and don't let people, the Bible even tells us, people will let you down.
Yeah.
The only person that won't let you down is God. So don't put your faith in people, because if you do that, not only will you be let down, but that's when your faith really gets tested.
Yeah.
So man, seeing those kind of things, it is very discouraging, but it's encouraging to hear that you see that, but you still continue that faith walk.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. There's 2 cases that I wish when I had left the state that I would have had. I had one that was a cop that I won't say the city because it's still an ongoing investigation, but he's no longer a cop. He's been on the run now for quite a while, that I wish I would have got. That was a pedophile that I would have given anything.
Wow.
And the investigator, knowing that's watching right now, he knows what to do. And I just, the one case, but then that pastor, I was just like, I would have given anything to been able to put the guy in handcuffs. But yeah, it causes a lot of inner conflict in that. And I tell people this, that it's okay to have that inner conflict, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's where you land on that inner conflict. And I will always land on that, God's got my back and I've got his. And no matter how many times I screw up but that is always having that as that foundation. And you're right, it is under attack. And, it's probably, you look at what's happened in our country in the last, year or so, taking Charlie Kirk's, assassination is one of those, I think, a pivotal moment in our country for faith, which is pretty cool to see a lot of the people come out and be a little bit more vocal and talk about that. And I struggle with that. Like, I'm not one of those that I don't ever want to force my faith on you type thing. And for me, it's very personal and always something that I've always struggled with, in the fact that, like, I never want to force somebody to feel that, like, right, I hate to say this, the left wants us to think what the left wants us to think. And here we are, like, I'm not telling you how to think. Go do you, just leave me alone, right? Type of thing. And the same thing with my faith. I'm not going to force you to think that way, but just think when you lean into that. Well, I don't think when you lean into that and you have that as a basis, your life's just different, And it's funny how it works out, because I look back at taking this job, and it took me really leaning into my faith to push me over the edge. And it was like, I was praying for open doors, and praying. My wife's telling me, here's the open door. Praying for the other open door. Here's the open door. Well, give me a sign. If we sell the house, then it'll be it. We'll sell the house, Well, okay, give me the sign. If the number's right, pretty soon it's like, you dumbass, wake up, right? Like, here I am. I'm giving you this opportunity. I've got you. And it's funny, because for the officers that are thinking about that jump, and you lean into that and you have that moment, I'm telling you, sometimes we always joke on it when people jumped out of the departments that the grass isn't always greener. It's very true. But a lot of times, man, if you lean into that and you're doing the right things and you're putting your priorities where they need to be, it's funny, because you can come up on the other side and there's this peace about it, right? Because for so long, it was so much struggle and being fearful of taking that jump. And then once you jumped, and then you just realize, you're like, all right, there's this peace. And I think that's really where, if you have that faith and you have that foundation, you'll have that peace, right? Because you never want to make a decision. You may be uncomfortable, but you'll know when you made the right decision, because there's just this inner, like, all right, I've got this type thing. So
yeah. I think there's the faith journey that we're on, particularly as law enforcement. I think it can be very similar in the sense that we, it's difficult to see some of the atrocities that are happening out there with faith leaders, because you see the hypocrisy in it, and it makes it challenging to kind of know, is that the route that we're supposed to go? But I love that we've highlighted here, because really what it does come down to, it's our relationship with Jesus that matters. That's where the strength is. That's where the power is. And it's so true that, when we look back on our lives, the moments that have really seemed to make sense or to give us that peace is when we have when we are walking that faith walk ourselves, absent of what the world is doing or what the church leaders are doing. It's almost an essential piece of our careers. Like, we have to have that. If there were any solution that we could offer to our brothers and sisters, it's maintain that walk with Jesus, because it gives us that peace that we talk about even early on in the show, about just being okay with the setbacks, be okay with the failures, the missteps. Nobody died today, right? That kind of mentality. That's what our faith walk gives us, that ability to just hand it over to Him and know, and then believe and trust that He's in complete control. To me, it's just an essential piece of our servant heart profession. There's so many, even retirees that I speak with now, who talk about, if there's any regret that they had, it's that they didn't do more to talk vulnerably about the difficulties of the job, and that they didn't express their faith more. And I think that's a powerful testimony there for our listeners, that these are people who are, if they could have course corrected, it's really one of the main regrets that they have. And so we have the opportunity, or our listeners who are currently active right now have the opportunity to really embrace that and integrate that into your walk as a first responder, and really get some of that peace that I think ultimately is what we're looking for. I think that's really the goal, right? We want peace.
And I'll say this too, it's interesting, I feel sorry for the people that don't have faith, and for us, we know what I know I'm in good company here, is like what our faith is. And I think we're talking about the same type of faith here. And, for the ones that don't have that, I feel sorry for those people. But I think every one of them kind of know, even when they deny or they don't think exist, I think right? And whatever that is to that person, whatever that faith is, to me, it's Jesus Christ. I know that. And so just having that faith to go back on, I challenge everybody to, when you start to hear that or feel that, that's something, right? And I go back to sitting there with a gun and that being so loud, that voice. And I told this to another person one time, that when you were going through what you were going through in that moment, don't tell me you weren't hearing something. And it's so loud. Well, the problem is, you know, how many of us have walked a walk or had faith, and that's been calling out the whole time, right? That's been there the whole entire time, whether it be red flags, whether it be anything else. And to this day, it's like you sit back and you go, man, first off, thank you for being the worst reloader in all of the world, but also that I can sit there and I can hear that voice. And it wasn't like me telling myself, hey, don't do this. You know, it was, there's something else. Think about what this is. What are you doing? And that's not me telling that to myself, because if it was me in that moment, the person struggling with anxiety, the person who's struggling with depression, that person's making the conscious effort in their life at that moment.
Right.
So it has to be something else, right? And I think every person that's been in a moment like that, or in a moment of despair or fear or last moments of life, they hear that voice if they listen hard enough. No matter, I don't care if you believe or not, if you believe in our Christ or not, you hear that voice and that voice exists. The problem is that voice is constantly always talking. And that's not us. Brad talks a lot. Brad talks a lot in his head. There's times when you know that's something else, right? So I just challenge people to like listen to that sometimes. You know, amongst my transition from law enforcement to the private sector, that voice was so loud, and I was just trying to get it to shut up because I wanted it to be my way. Because in my mind, Brad thought he knew exactly what he needed to do, which is law enforcement, break down doors, do this for 20 more years. This is all you're good for. You can do nothing else. And I guarantee those other officers that are having that exact same thing. And so I tell those people is like, don't listen to the voice of you. There's something else talking to you. And I almost guarantee you, we know who's talking to you. It's just a matter of listening and taking that leap of faith. So
yeah, there's always voices, and you've always got people with opinions telling you what you should or shouldn't do. And sometimes that voice is loud. Sometimes it's that still small voice we hear. But that's why, for me personally, it's been so important. I mean, my relationship with Christ is the ultimate. And I haven't put the emphasis on it. I should. I haven't been as vocal about it as I should. But I know for me personally, it's always been very important, that relationship with Christ. And I've always said that, you know, any success I've ever had, it's never been because of me, because I'm special or anything. It's been the grace and blessings of God and the people He's put around me. So next to my relationship with God, there's a relationship that's really special for me, a voice I listen to. That's my wife. And my wife didn't come from necessarily a family like your wife that was like, everybody's got a badge. Her father was a 20-year Navy man. He was an aviator, flew for 20 years in the Navy. Her mother's father was actually an officer in Florida. He committed suicide. I mean, this has been a problem for generations.
yeah.
But she didn't have that much of a direct connection to law enforcement because he died years before she was born. You got to me, to what a lot of viewers may see as a unique situation, but it's really not that unique in policing, in that you're married to another officer.
Yeah.
It's really
So what
cool
is it? Nurses? What are we supposed to marry? Nurses, teachers? Yeah.
Other cops.
So I would tell you that woman is, first off, she's a saint for being married to me.
I know the feeling.
I put her through so much in our marriage, and I'll throw some slack. She's put me through some stuff too. So it's not, but, and I'm a hard person to live with. I'm a hard person to try to, especially always trying to maintain some level of excellence, even though I'm not excellent, trying to be uncommon, even though most of me is just common. And there's two folds about being married to a cop. First off, I was, like I said, I was engaged going into the academy, and I'm telling you, I walked in the first day. I'll tell you, I said two things. I won't say what I was going to say the first thing, because I guarantee your dad's going to listen to this, because if he comes on the podcast, I don't want to hear that. But there was just something about her. I was like, she's bad, and I don't want to marry her. And so we were lucky in the sense of like, we almost didn't have to talk about stuff because she understood it, right? If I came on and I didn't want to talk about anything, we talked about it way too much. It's like what I talk about the stopgaps and the friends you had in the years before, and like separating the work. Like, we just lived cop work, right? And you have to think, like, I'm married into it. Service on my side, service on her side, right? Both brothers FBI, one DEA, one, director of DEA, chief of global ops, like uncles. I mean, the parties that we grow up, dating was all the Saxon chief from around here and all the cops from it. It's just, you live and breathe that. There was no stopgaps in place for us being completely inundated in this job. And so a lot of struggles we have as a marriage was because we just it's all we did. And we never separated from the job, right? So it's all we did. And there's some health to that because it was easy for me to communicate to her, I'm dealing with this, and she understood.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're not married to somebody in that space, or you have friends that aren't in that space, they have no way to ever understand what that's like. For me, she does, right? She's been there. And probably a lot longer in the fact that her she's grown up in that culture. But I tell you, it is the toughest thing a man can do, is the best thing, but just be married. Like it takes work. We were at SHOT Show last week, and we don't have babysitters anymore. When we moved down to Austin for this job, up here we had my parents, her parents, and stuff. So we don't get a lot of alone time anymore, which is a struggle. But she came to Vegas, and she was coming to SHOT Show, so I was there all week, and so I flew her in on Wednesday. So pumped to see her. And all week long, we're there with, she's never really, this is her first time being inundated in the industry. I've been in it now for, between the podcast and this space for, well over a year now. And so I've got my own friends and stuff, and, she hasn't really been a part of that yet until we moved down there. And everybody kept talking about how we had a blast. Like, when's the last time we went out to a club, and we both went dancing, and, and everybody was talking about, oh, y'all are just like perfect and, no issues. And I'm like, boy, do you know the battle it takes there. And we're surrounded by a lot of younger couples. And it just takes work. It is the hardest thing you can do. And there's ups and there's downs. But I tell you, she's the strongest. I mean, shoot, like she won't tell you that, but I'm telling you, first off, like I said, to be a mother of me and to be married to me, the two women in my life, like it's a lot. But yeah, man, it's one of those things that I think, how much is the divorce rate? Yeah, it's like 65%. Yeah. And here's the deal. I go back, that's the easy way. That is the easy thing, right? The hard thing is to face, mistakes or issues or situations or people, and to go, you know what, this is going to take work, and commit to that. That's the hard thing. And I challenge people, do the hard thing.
Yeah.
Do the hard thing, because if you can overcome the easy stuff, like what are you really doing?
Yeah.
Right. And so every day we wake up, and the amount of fights and the yellings and stuff that every day, and it's a Puerto Rican and an Italian. And so it's like, imagine how loud our house is with our kids. Right.
But the food's great.
Well, she doesn't cook.
Oh, there. So damn, everybody.
But, yeah.
Disregard.
If there's one fault, that's her only fault. She doesn't cook. But yeah, man, it's one of those things, and it's a battle. And I just challenge people, like, just do the hard thing, like try to work at it. Right.
Yeah, I think that's such good advice. We need to really, we should talk a little bit about marriage because of the divorce rate in our profession and how bad it is. And the reality is, we're not going into this profession wanting to get divorced. We're doing it because we believe that, I guess we believe that there's better. We believe that, the battles are too much. And I think that's where we're making the mistake, is that, not to say that there aren't some relationships that aren't worth, maybe putting ties. There probably is that scenario in there, but for us to have a 65% divorce rate, there's a good chance that we're throwing in the towel sooner than we need to. And that's why I really like the advice that you just got to work. You got to continue to work at it. You probably made a pretty good decision. Not you, but our law enforcement brothers and sisters, we probably made a pretty good decision when we, hopefully when we decided to go the steps to get married. But the, relationships are tough. It is very likely marriage could be one of the most unnatural things to do, in the sense that you come across a person at a point in your life where you find them attractive for multiple reasons, and you kind of move next into a relationship and you're very compatible. But to assume that somehow or another we're going to stay compatible for the rest of our life as we transition out,
Never change.
Yeah, and never changes. It's crazy. That's short-sighted. We are going to change, but we can still change together. And if you apply what you said earlier, you know, that some of these setbacks or the uncomfortableness are really just opportunities to, you know, to get comfortable in that space and to fail forward. You know, we can apply that to our marriages, and in fact we should, because I know that, you know, Neil knows my story in divorce, that you know, I documented it pretty well when I wrote that book, Checkpoints. But the reality is that there was nothing I experienced in policing that even compared to the crisis that I went through during divorce. It is, in fact, it is a crisis, especially when you have children. And I don't know how we got to a point in law enforcement where, even with a 65% divorce rate, that we were almost making light of divorce as in first and second, third marriage is a charm. No, it's not. You know, the first marriage I had that were really only, you know, the marriage I've had, and that divorce really caused me to unravel at such a rate that I didn't even know who I was. It is difficult, and I think that, you know, our marriages are they're worth fighting for, but we got to put in the work.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. There's some marriage. Look, if you're the rookie cop that's marrying the stripper, that's not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we got to choose well.
That's not what we're talking
It's about we chose well.
Yes.
Yeah, then it's worth fighting for.
Yeah, I think you're right. Though we talk about the dark humor, right? It's our coping mechanism sometimes, but it's not just about the calls we're on. It's about our personal lives. And I've been just as guilty as anyone. I remember one of my buddies got married and had a really small wedding, and somebody's giving me grief about the fact that I wasn't at his wedding, and just almost instinctively I said, "Oh, that's all right. I'll make his next one.
Yeah.
I'll be at his next wedding," making a joke.
Yeah.
But it's sad that I let myself get to a point where not only did I just realized, hey, it's just going to happen to so many of us without trying to change. I was making jokes about it. I think a lot of it comes down to the work, though. Like you said, I mean, my wife is absolutely wonderful, the most patient person in the world, beautiful inside and out. But we got to work at it, man, because we're two different people.
Yeah.
And you put two different people together, like every day living in the same house, you're going to have struggles. And I think sometimes we just expect it to be easy, like it was in you fall in love, you're all infatuated, you can't stand to be apart from each other for a second. That will pass, especially once you start having kids. Once life really starts happening, once you start facing struggles. And I'll say, back to the faith thing, for us, what's done it, I think, more than anything, we're both preachers' kids, but you know how preachers' kids are. They're the worst ones, right?
They are.
But when tell me, once you get back to it, though, and you put that faith at the center, for us anyway, that's what's drawn us closer together and help us push through whatever hard times we might have. And I don't know how we do it without that, to be honest with you.
No, I agree. And I'll speak to this too, just because I hope this sinks in for somebody, because for the ones that are in this career, especially the ones that are early on in this career, that have been fortunate enough to be married to somebody that's in the space or even the service model space, get time away from this. Get time away from this. Like if I could talk about one stopgap, like separate completely, keep your circle away from that, have things outside of this job. Because I'm telling you, if you just soak this up in everything you do, you know, that who you're hanging out with on the weekend is police work. Afterwards, police work. This work, police work. I'm telling you, there's more trouble in that. I'm not saying that there's not good people to be friends with, right? But take those friends and go do something besides police work. Don't talk about police work, you know? Find other things. Like one thing for me is, like, we worked a lot of part-times, but that's why what was really important to me about doing the podcast is, you know, first off, I wanted to build some more business knowledge, right? Aside from law enforcement, but I just great. I go make $125 working at a AT&T stadium or a side job, right? But like, I'm just doing that off my off hours, right? So why not invest in something where I can learn something and have a trade where I'm not just drowning in more police work, putting the uniform back on. And so it just create those moments of just like, all right, separation. That's healthy, right? Because it doesn't have to always be police work, right? There's other things you can be doing to build positivity in your life and positive momentum. So
Well, yeah. So you're still reserving now. You want to continue the job, which
Yeah.
I think is great. I think it's great that you're in a role now, even in the private sector, where not only are you get to work around cops, but y'all are doing good things for cops.
Yeah.
So that's got to feel good. But talking about that, always a cop, 24/7, 365. I remember for me, it's probably the first 2 to 3 years. If there was a reason for me to be at work or put on the uniform, I was doing it, whether it was working overtime, working special details, part-times, and, you go through that phase. I do this for free. I can't believe they're paying me. You get over that.
Yeah,
Right.
quick.
That goes your way fast.
Yeah.
You want that check coming in. But I was there all the time. Since you're still in, are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing, which is a lot of people get onto the new generation of cops. We can't even hardly get them to come in and work overtime. We can't get them to work special details. It's because they are prioritizing their personal life, their family life. Yeah. They understand, there can be such a thing as a work-life balance. Or are you seeing the same thing with the younger officers coming in?
Yeah. So this is what was interesting. Well, first off, this is a twofold question because I think there's just a lot more lazy people nowadays in this current generation, and that goes across every spectrum of private and public sector. Trying to find good people to have employed right now is just super hard across all aspects. Like I would hate to be in a recruiting office at a police department after a lot of the resumes I had to read for people I'm hiring, for this company. Just a lot of fluff. But anyways, but yeah, I would say like working across the state and get to work, like that was one other cool thing of like working in the state and doing fugitives. Like we got to go everywhere, right? You got to meet so many different departments. To me, I don't know if it's necessarily like them creating the time. I would hope that's the goal, right? I would hope that we are getting to a point where officers are saying like, I need this time, right? I do see that definitely within the, older generation of officers that we've, met. I just think a lot of it's just trying to find employees right now and officers that just want to work because here's the deal, I'm a workaholic. One of my employees said to me as I was walking out the door the other day, she was like, I don't understand why you were here before everybody else and now you're leaving after everybody. That sounds so stupid, but that's just like, I just am a workaholic, and that's rare these days.
It is.
And you find some people that have that drive and that discipline. But yeah, I don't know, like, for the agency I'm at now, like it's just so different being at such a small agency, and it's actually kind of cool. Because it was just cool to actually put a uniform back on, which was crazy having people come up and thank you for doing your job. I'm not used to that being in my current, last role. But yeah, I think that I hope that's what's happening. I hope that officers are seeking out that more. I don't know necessarily if I see that way, or am I just being like truly negative and judgmental in this act of like, well, we're just struggling to find good people. But I would hope we're moving in that direction where people are seeking that out and have that. And I would encourage everybody to have that.
Something else I'm seeing, and again, maybe I'm being too optimistic, I don't know, is some of the younger officers that are coming into the profession are much more inclined to take advantage of the resources that are available, meaning like counseling and things like that. Where when we came in, I mean, you don't even talk about it, much less go to a therapist. Are you serious? That's what you do if you're crazy and weak, right? Yeah. But it's like this generation coming in, it's like, okay, you know what? I think I need some help. I think I'll go talk to somebody. And they're okay talking about it. I'm seeing some of the old farts like me who are finally starting to come around, but it seems some of these younger officers coming in are actually okay when they get here. Yeah. And as long as we don't taint them once they do show up, right, I think there's a chance that, like the resources at AWA, the Warriors Refuge, the counseling, the pastor, whatever you want to go to, as long as we are making those things available and easily accessible, I think we might be seeing more people take advantage of them, which is going to help with the divorce rate, suicide rate, depression and anxiety, alcoholism, all kinds of substance abuse. My hope is that's where we're trending right now.
Yeah. So I have an opinion on this, and my opinion is probably not well liked. And this is probably, I don't know if you would call it the Latin culture in me of, I'm going to say this and I don't want this to come across negative. I hope what I'm trying to say will come across, because every time I say this, everybody I think takes it the wrong way. I agree. I think we're seeing the younger generation have that. There's a part of me that thinks because bear with me, I'm about to say this, we're creating a softer generation. And there's aspects of us creating a softer generation that are good. I still think that we need to have men be men and lead like
Amen,
men,
brother.
right? But if I'm taking away, and I'll say this, the more Brad answer this, we're inputting a lot of snowflakes into society. With inputting a lot of those snowflakes and a lot of this softness and a lot of this be in touch with your feelings, I think we're getting a younger generation that there is a balance.
Agreed.
That you have to know, how do I say this? Know when to turn it on and when to turn it off, but know you should always have access to that and be able to communicate that way and have that as your default, right? Where I hope we don't fail is to create such a soft generation that there's no stepping up or leading, right? There's no taking action. I can have these feelings, but I'm not taking any action. For those that are struggling that have these issues, right? The hard thing is to go through that moment like I'm talking about, but there needs to be action for that, right? And so, yes, I do think the generations are talking about this stuff, but I just hope that there's follow-up on that it's good that we're breaking down these barriers, and I do think that a lot of senior officers are starting to buy into this more. But we also have those senior officers that are like me that think of this way, that I think, well, don't be a snowflake. We need to have a hard generation. Look, you can be a hard-ass man, and to be able to sit there and talk about what your struggles are. I have much more respect for the man that can sit there and talk about having a gun in his mouth and struggling than I would the man that says, no, I've never really thought of anything like that. I've never had any struggle. Again, I go back to the harder thing is what that person has gone through than the person who doesn't struggle with it, right?
I think you got to send a balance, like you said. I mean, there are plenty of people out there, and a lot of in academia, talking about masculinity as a disease, as we need to get rid of it. We got to get rid of masculinity. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But there's the balance there where you have to be willing to be the one that talks about that kind of stuff, that will admit that, hey, you know what? Yeah, I struggle sometimes. I've got issues just like anybody else. Don't try to act like you have it all together. But the balance is the hardest part to do.
Yeah.
And I don't want us to create a soft generation.
Right.
I mean, we project power and authority in the United States, which is one of the reasons we're the most powerful country in the world.
Right.
And safe compared to all these other countries. We're seeing so many things going on. We have to project authority. And I think it's important for us to be able to be strong, but sometimes being strong means getting help you need when you need it.
Yeah. And I said this before too, that I hope we soften our hearts and allow us to have soft hearts, but don't think for a second that I'm not thinking about what button I'm going to shoot you in the chest with, or wear your skin if you do something to my kids, right?
Yeah.
Like having that aggression and having that, but have a soft heart, right?
Yeah.
And a soft heart, I think about a lot of that is to have that open mindedness to be able to talk about those things. And I still struggle with that, right? So I welcome that we're building a generation of openness and being able to do that. But I just caution those that don't lose the masculinity aspect of that. Don't lose the leadership aspect of that, where you need to lead from the front and step up when you need to step up. You can have a soft heart and you can have a calm mind and you can be open about that. But when it's time to turn it on, turn it on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think I have a more of the optimist. I think when I look at the generational, at least from policing, from just, I guess, the optimist in me says that every generation of police is going to step up and answer the call, and they're going to handle it at a high level. It's going to just be a different level. It's going to be different. Maybe not level, but it's going to be different than the way the generation before us handled it and the way our generation did. I've always kind of dubbed myself as a little bit of a contrarian. Like, I've always looked at the way we did things and said, well, why do we do it that way? What made them, the generation of police before us, what made them the deciders of all things? Like, how did they know, how to do it right? And I think even today, I say this, I'll say something unpopular too, so we'll both be disliked on this episode. But I don't think the generation of policing before us got it right. I think they were tough. I think they were gritty. I think they would catch a bad guy at all costs. But I think they misstepped on what the mental game of this job really was.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. And so I don't think that they were the greatest police generation. I don't even think that ours was. I think ours missed too.
Yeah.
My hope is that it's the next generation that's going to get this figured out, because they are willing to ask, hey, well, what's in it for me? How are you protecting my mental health? I don't know what they're going to deliver but I think they're asking the right question. And I think they stand to be really the greatest police generation, the next generation. I think they stand to be the ones that actually lay the right tracks and make this profession something that's actually sustainable to be a dad, a husband, a wife, a mother in this profession, and do both successfully. Because I don't think we did it. And I definitely don't think the generation before us did.
Let me ask you a question. I'm going to ask y'all a question now.
Yeah.
This is something I was just thinking about the other day. So we moved down outside of Boston to the Hill Country, and there's a gentleman there that just turned 100, and he served in Korean War, and I forget what he's done a bunch of stuff. Was a Marine, and kind gentleman, soft heart, remembers everything, can talk about it all. What is different about that generation of man and all the stuff that they fought and went through, like our grandfathers and everything, the stuff that they went through war and then came out and provided to America and were officers and everything. And yeah, they did a lot of stuff wrong, but I ask myself all the time, why were they different mentally than what we have now?
I've asked the same question to myself. I don't have a perfect answer. We got a guy locally named Don Graves, similar. He was at Iwo Jima. He was a flamethrower. This guy was in some incredible stuff that we read about now. To us, it's history.
Yeah.
This dude lived it, and he's still alive. He's still kicking. He's doing some amazing things. We did hear from that generation about shell shock, which is basically like early diagnosis of PTSD, I guess is what you could call that. And we're talking about young men who would be deployed, and it wasn't like they were there for 6, 12 months. They were just there. Yeah. They would be there for years, either until, unfortunately they died. They were so severely injured they couldn't continue, or the war was over. And they come back and seem to be able to transition back into society fairly adequately, right? Like champs, to be honest. But we see so many who struggle, and like you, one of the regrets I have, I was never in the military. So far be it for me to second guess how anybody who served or is serving our military acts, because I have no right to question it. But it does seem that generation, they call it the greatest generation, that generation was able to deal with some of the most traumatic battles that we have had as a country. Yeah. And we were talking hand-to-hand combat. That's brutal stuff, but they come back. I would love to be able to tap into whatever they have.
Yeah.
I hate that we are losing so many. There are not many of them left.
And that's the point I get at, is like, we talk about what the last generation of law enforcement did, and and hoping what the next generation did, but there's still stuff to learn from all that.
Yeah.
And the reason I ask that question is, like, I still think there's something to learn from that. Look, I'm not saying, and again, I'm with you, I hadn't served in the military, and I thank every one of them for the service and all that they've sacrificed, and I'm not saying they didn't struggle. Like, I guarantee they all struggle with something in one way or another, but there's just something different. And every time I talk to one of these gentlemen, or anybody that served at that level for that time period, it's just something different. And so I always go back to, like, how are we gonna? So much of that generation is dying, right? We just lost the last one on the Arizona, I think recently. They just USS Arizona, right, on Pearl Harbor. They just buried him out at sea, and we're such a forgetful nation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at New York right now.
Yeah.
Look at what just happened in this election. Look at what happened there in 9/11, right? We're such a forgetful nation, and we don't ever learn from our past and don't learn from those individuals, because there's something different there, right? There's something different about the police work that was before us, and we never take into consideration. We try to always do this, and then we say, we have these podcasts, we do these shows, we do these things, and we say we're going to make this momentum, and then we hope the next generation does this. But it's a matter of that generation to absorb what's come from the past, right? And if you don't take the moment to try to learn from that, why is it just different for them?
Yeah.
I'm not saying they didn't struggle, but there's just something different.
Yeah. Let me take a stab at this, man, because I love this question. Why was that generation, really, they were dubbed the greatest generation. And in fact, I think they were, right? So why? What about this? What about this for consideration? Yes, they did a difficult job, but generations since then have done difficult jobs as well. What about them
was just so durable afterwards. And maybe, or could it have been, that there was a level of appreciation for that generation that this country gave that we may not have seen since then. And so if that's true, then maybe one of the ingredient is appreciation. And maybe when we look at what's happened to our servicemen and women, our military, and to our law enforcement over the last 15, 20 years at least, pretty well documented over the last 20 years, there has been an absence of appreciation. There's been a higher level of scrutiny really since Vietnam.
Yeah, exactly.
Since Vietnam, there has been a level of scrutiny, whether warranted or not. I really, that's not the conversation I think I want to engage in. But there's been a level of scrutiny that has been so over the top, that has been absent of consideration for a lot of things, absent of appreciation in a lot of areas that it should have had, that maybe that has caused other generations to not really be able to kind of sustain, because the scrutiny is destroying maybe the spirit of what it is that we do.
Where you put up the barriers and you put up the walls that become the wrong walls, the wrong barriers, and then there's just divide, and then now you're creating the divide, and then now we're coming into things and we start thinking this is racism, and it's not racism, it's actually just all cops are thinking this, and they're thinking that type thing. That's actually really, really good. That's very, I should write another book. Very good.
I thought about the fact we are doing better now by welcoming home our fighting men and women than we did in Vietnam. Obviously, I've even heard so much when you meet a Vietnam veteran, you don't even say thank you for your service, you say welcome home, because many of them didn't hear that. You think about the contrast of that with what happened, say, after World War II. There were parades. There are so many iconic photos of how they were being welcomed back. They were heroes. You think about how our country came together, even like a Rosie the Riveter. I mean, everyone even back home was working towards this war effort. It was a combined effort, and everyone was supporting everybody. But those fighting men that came back, they were absolute heroes when they stepped back on our soil. Yeah. We definitely didn't do that in Vietnam. Not only would not welcome them back, many in our country were treating them so poorly. It was awful, the things they would do, the things they would say. There were protests, there were riots, and you think about not only the way they were received, but the way our country was in turmoil over that. Completely different from World War II. And I think now where we are, it's not one or the other. Maybe it's a combination of the two, but you're right. Maybe it's that support, that camaraderie that maybe made them able to integrate a little more successfully than some. But I also love the fact you brought up law enforcement.
The protest age.
Absolutely, man.
The protest age. This is one of the things that doesn't get talked about as much as it should. But when we went through the protest age, which, I don't know how many years before the downtown ambush in Dallas, July 7th. But I know, that I've had this conversation with many law enforcement officers, particularly with Dallas, that there is it was emotionally conflicting to. Well, let me context this by saying working protests is hard enough as it is, right? You have a group of people that have, taken to the streets, really, to express their constitutional First Amendment rights, but the reality is, they're taking to the streets in order to express this constitutional right, which starts the very first, really infraction of the law, and we make concessions for it. And now they're impeding, traffic or intersections, and we're making concessions. And so there's this really uneasy, like, wait, what exactly are we doing here? And then when the numbers get bigger and the demonstrations or protests get heated, police officers are left to really to police this, absent of, your own personal feelings about it. You're supposed to remove that as if that were humanly possible, which it is not, right? So, but you're supposed to do that. And then even further, somehow your peace is not supposed to be breached if the crowds get unruly. So all of that in context is a difficult environment. Now let's level it up now. Now let's make that exact same unruly demonstration taking to the streets and all of the other pieces surrounding it, and now it's against you.
right? Now you're the bad guy. Your mere presence is a show of force in their opinion.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to get into often because of the actions of a few, we're painting a broad brush on law enforcement, and that became the environment. And I will tell you this, as a person who's not only worked protests but been the incident commander over them, I will tell you that I waited and continue to wait for someone to step up and defend our side on this thing. When everyone is marching and demonstrating against police, because not only are we consuming an incredibly unhealthy amount of other people's violence and other people's actions and tragedies and trying to carry those, but now we're in position where everyone seems to be turning on us and no one seems to be defending us. And so, yeah, that can make an incredibly difficult environment, if not additionally unhealthy environment for our men and women. And maybe that is what the missing piece of the equation is. Maybe that's it, America. Maybe there has to be an active and consistent voice of support and appreciation for the men and women who are carrying heavy loads, both in our servicemen and women and our first responders. Maybe until that piece is in place, maybe we are never going to solve the mental health or emotional health equation, because appreciation might and support for that really for the work that our men and women are doing.
That's twofold, because it's funny you're talking about appreciation from one to one, but I think you have to appreciate yourself. And any of this talk we're talking about in law enforcement and mental health and anything like that, if you don't appreciate yourself and you don't try to look at your inner self and try to take care of yourself, like, it's just mute. You can have as many people that are appreciating you. I've always had people around me appreciating me and being there for you. But until you realize that you need to do it to yourself and allow yourself to be appreciated by your own self, it's a failure point, right? And I'm not saying be boastful. I'm not saying that, be prideful and stuff. I'm talking about truly taking yourself and going, you know what, I need to take care of number one. We can do all this. We can't protect the public, can't protect our families if we're not protecting ourselves.
Yeah.
And if we're not willing to appreciate ourselves and appreciate our mind and appreciate our health or anything like that, all this is just from you point, right? I told my wife when I was really trying to, after you asked about breaking my back, and not a fancy story, rolling around in jiu-jitsu, and then went and did CrossFit and decided to fall down, and, here was 3 broken transverse prostheses, but then tried to go back to work, and then half the team taking like one of those medicine balls trying to move me around because my back was so frozen. But I told her it was like, enough is enough. And what was crazy is I was still active, just fat. And Chris will actually, I'll guarantee you, after telling the story, send you a photo of the before and after. And I knew what the problem was, right? And aside from all the problems, but I finally told her, I was like, I got to get selfish. Like, I have to get selfish at this point. Like, I do everything for everybody else, or I'm selfish and I do too many things for myself, but not being selfish for my health and mental health and stuff. And it just took that fire of just like, sometimes you just got to get selfish. As I tell these cops, I tell people, like, get selfish, like put pride, make your health the priority, right? Because once you do that, it won't be perfect, but there's so much more that'll fall in line. And just from the day to day, being able to wake up and go, all right, let's kill this day, right? So if anything, like, appreciating yourself and being selfish in that appreciation of, like, that's okay to think that way. It's not okay to be selfish and,
Right.
But you get what I'm saying, like, to be selfish in appreciation of yourself. And I don't do it enough, I try to be better in those areas, but if more officers would be selfish to their own appreciation, I think we would see another rise of this, and letting officers know that it's okay to be that.
I think a lot of most first responders are humble people with servant's hearts.
Yeah.
I always feel like they have to serve others, but you're right, you got to take care of yourself first before you can take care of anyone else. And I've been very guilty of negative self-talk a lot. And really, other than our conversations with God, our most important conversations are the ones we have with ourselves.
Yeah.
And we have to learn to be kind to ourselves, because we are humans. We're going to fail. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to fail forward, right? We're going to learn from it and continue on. But instead of always dwelling only on the mistakes, we got to look for the positives, even if they're small,
Right.
and then build on those, because I don't think most of us are very good at that. We're very hard on ourselves. We set standards for ourselves that really no one could achieve.
Yeah.
So we're going to fail, but then when we do, we can't believe it happened.
Yeah.
And we're so down on ourselves.
No, I agree. And we set this level of excellence that, you know, and I say this to my teams now, like I expect excellence out of everybody, right? And excellence doesn't mean everything has to always be perfectly executed, right? I hope to God it does. So if any of y'all are listening, you better execute perfectly. But that doesn't mean everything has to be perfect, right?
Right.
To me, there could be several failure points. How many times did we have an operation that you would plan for and it would go good, it would go great, you know, perfectly executed. And then you get in the after action, and what's the first thing you're doing? You're talking about all the pain points that didn't go well, right? Like, why weren't you here? What happened here? We could have done this different, right? That doesn't mean there wasn't excellence there. There could be moments of excellence that happen in amongst, you know, things that a failure, right? But as long as we're trying to attain that and we're pushing for that, I think that's what separates truly the common from the uncommon, of those that are chasing that. And we do put these expectations on ourselves as type A personalities that are driving for that. But you know what? I also wouldn't have any other way.
Yeah.
Right. You know, it's like, as much as all the mistakes I've made, of all the issues I've had and the pain points, and like, I look at, you know, in this role now of like, you know, not just being okay with where I'm at and thinking about what's next, but I also wouldn't change that. Right. Because I think that's what also keeps us driving for more. I think if I had the mindset of like, all right, cool, I got this huge contract, we're good. All right, coast. We're never, like, I'm not comfortable being a $300 million company. I keep telling the team, I said, when we were $1 billion company, I will, that's when I will, and even then we'll probably get to it, and I'm going to be like, all right, what's next?
Yep.
And I don't want that's a burden to live with, and it's tough to live that way, but I also wouldn't change that, right? And even any of the mistakes and issues mentally, like, I still don't think I would change anything, because I don't think I would have the drive I have. And I hope that, you know, I hope my kids will take away nothing of all the negative points, but they'll just take those positives. But yeah.
Strength in the struggle, man.
Yeah, dude.
Where it comes from.
Yeah. Again, I think it's weird when people ask me, like, well, you know, when I was asked what's the goal for this year, to be uncomfortable, and that sounds so cliche, but it's just like, if you create more uncomfortable points in your life, you'll be amazed at how many more things you can push through, right? And for those that are in that uncomfortable place right now, that are in that dark spot, that's not the uncomfortable spot I'm talking about. That's, you know, it's pushing through to that, to then obtaining those other uncomfortable points throughout your life that, you know, that are for something, you know?
I think what you're doing is really putting on display what that next gen leader is, right? Like, we have this idea of the traditional leader as just, you know, hard charging, right? They're just taking on the battle, and they're getting the job done, you know, a level of grit in there and even success. But we've never really highlighted that uncomfortable space that you're highlighting right now.
Yeah.
You know, we've never highlighted the failing, and really the ability to lead during that failure, to say, hey, listen, I misstepped, I botched, and here's what I'm going to do, you know, to put in some stop gaps to hope this doesn't happen again. It might still happen again, but here's how I'm dusting myself off and getting back on point and taking on this next challenge. That's the next gen leader right there. We've got to highlight that. We've got to highlight it because it's human.
Yeah.
It's what the real story is. And I think maybe that's what happened in the past, was we didn't really highlight the failures. We just highlighted the successes, and it led the rest of us incorrectly to believe that it's that or bust, that you either succeed and you're gritty, or else you're less than. And we're not less than. What we are is 100% human. The failure is what makes us human. The thing that makes us great is what we do during that failure.
And again, like, I think we talked about it before, like, you know, so for me right now, getting into a leader in the business space, especially in the firearms industry, and where we're looked at, you know, one of the main big players, right? So I come in here with no experience of that, right? You know, some business experience, you know, education experience on business and going down these, but truly not having what it is. But what I did for so long in my life was squandered the leadership aspect of it. I never wanted to be the leader. Like I always just pushed that down, right? And so there was one thing I was like, I'm not going to know this space I'm going into, right? I know what I want to do. I know what the input is. I know what the output needs to be. But as long as we can lead under pressure and I allow that leadership to come out, I think that's where I shine, not to toot my horn. But you go back to that leadership is not what's on the book, is what it is, right? That's a manager, right? A leader can go in that, allow that book to be a guiding thing and actually care for the people and understand the people and create the relationship, not the transaction, and allow failure to happen, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, you go back to what you're saying. There's not a single one of my business mentors that launched a business and it was $100 million successful year one, right? How many times do we hear stories where it's just failure after failure after failure? How many times do we have the officers, the chiefs that have risen, you know, that have come through different pain points, you know, generals that have just had these stories? It's not perfect. And if we don't look at those failures and what I'm in and truly take lesson and take heed on that, you're not a leader, right? A leader focuses on the failure. In my opinion, a leader focuses on the failure, and a leader doesn't know how to take that failure and make that a win and really turn even the worst of the worst situation into, hey, look, here's what came of that. And it may not always be the best outcome, right? But I guarantee there's something that we're going to learn from that. And in this case, if we have the one officer, if we have the one person that's, you know, that's trying to make his decision on where do I take my career from here? Am I ready to leave law enforcement and there's stuff on the other side? Look, you're going to fail. It's going to suck. It is scary taking that jump. But I tell you what, if you take that jump and it's for the right reason, you're going to fail, but you learn from that. I guarantee you'll be a far bigger leader in the space than a lot of other people. Because you have, you know, you can cops can separate themselves in a boardroom against the Harvard Ivy Leagues all the time, because we've had so many different failures and we've learned from those and different stress points those guys have never had. Okay, you got a paper cut, you know, cool. Guess what, buddy? Here's what I've done. This is what I did on a Monday. Lean into that. Use that. Because that kind of momentum and that kind of drive, there are companies out there that would give anything for that. Put it the right way.
Man, I tell you what, this has been a great episode.
Yeah.
A lot of insight about a lot of things having to do with just the job, meaning the law enforcement job, one you've done for well over a decade now in many different roles, but also getting to hear about taking that leap, you know, having that faith and doing so well at your job.
It's not perfect. I won't say that, but you know, I appreciate it. And it's one of those things, it was scary. And I go back to like, it truly was, I mean, bawling my eyes out, not really because it was what was my identity. And now I'm just leaning into letting officers know that like, look, you can still be plugged. I was not going to give up the gun and badge 100%.
Yeah.
It was not happening. And that's probably like me looking at God and going, hey, listen, I got to have some foot in here too. But there's other stuff out there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you have to give, it doesn't mean you're giving up the brotherhood. Doesn't mean you have to do any of that. There's so much more and you have so much more value to add to it. Yes, my identity is service, you know, but it's not the badge. It's my family. It's this other job.
Yeah.
But that can all wrap up into one. And there's so much that, you know, we have. And, you know, and for me, not being, you know, not retiring, you know, was a little bit different for me, right? Like I wasn't able to retire and have a full career, but I wasn't going to get this chance ever again.
Yeah.
And so that was what was super scary for me, was literally like, well, I could do a few more years and I got it. Do I leave now? But it was, you know, what my wife said, are you ever going to get this chance again? Not many people get this. But I guarantee there's somebody else that's having that same issue. And it's, you know, it may not be the right decision for everybody.
Well, especially hard with a family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So yeah.
And then move
a lot
them
of courage.
and move them. Yeah.
No doubt.
So,
I'll tell you what, man, means a lot that you took the time, that you came, drove hours to be here with us today. I know there's a lot of people that are going to get a lot out of this, because I got a lot out of this. Just listening to your story, listening to all that you've been through, all that you've overcome, and just being honest, man. Just ripping back the layers and being honest. Not everybody's willing to do that. That takes strength, and I appreciate you coming on here and being strong and being honest with us, because that's what people need to hear. Because I guarantee you there are people listening that are going through some of the same things. And this kind of story, your life, your journey can inspire them to continue going too, to embrace the suck, embrace the uncomfortable situations that are in, but find a way to get through it.
Yeah. And I'm not perfect. So
No one is, brother.
There's nothing special about me, dude. So, but there's a lot of people that have come before me that have done way more and everything. But, it was time. I was called to do another podcast, yesterday and stuff. And I think there's something there. And I think it's just God saying, like, look, you have a story of something, right? And again, same thing with the podcast I did. You do one. If I saved one person during any of that, I had that, then all of it's worth it, but I greatly appreciate it coming here. This has been fun. It's been, it's almost healing in a sense. You don't realize, like, you can talk to family, you can talk to a counselor, and sometimes just sitting with two brothers and talking about stuff. And that's what I love about y'all's program. Because at the end of the day, when you go on these retreats or anything, there's no judgment there. And it's just talking and realizing that, look, you're not alone. There's so many people. Right. Everybody's got a story. Everybody, even if you're not in the industry. So I greatly appreciate it. It's been good.
Appreciate that. And appreciate you and Silencer Shop for supporting the work we do, because it is making a difference, man. And having partners like you gives us the opportunity to help even more people, and that means a lot.
Yeah, and we're gonna do more. We're excited about this year. There's so much growth within the industry, and looking at other ways to give back and use the foundation money to give to y'all, and identify things. And it's been a crawl, walk, run type thing, but this is what they get for hiring a cop to build a LE division, But I'm glad we're getting some momentum and be able to help. I love the fact that y'all are just doing so many different facets, and it was very important to me. And once I identified it, and I went to Travis and said, I want to do this. I think it's good to partner. We're really good as a company of not partnering just with anybody. When it comes to the brands and suppressors and everything, we look at, a lot of times we look at the people and the company and the ethics, and we look at, that's how our owners built the company. And so there's so many noise in nonprofits, but after getting to meet y'all and work with y'all and see what y'all are doing and what we can benefit and donate to is just, it's incredible, man. And we're just glad to be a part of it.
I'm glad to have you. And we always close out every episode with a prayer. Brother, if you'd like to have the honors, we'll extend it to you first. If not, one of us knuckleheads over here
I will let y'all.
Outstanding.
You want me to take it, or you got it?
I got it. I'll take it. All right. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we come today for just thanking you for all that you do for us. First and foremost, for the gift of salvation through the death, burial, and resurrection of your Son, Jesus Christ. And we thank you that that's a free gift, because none of us deserve it and we could never earn it. I want to thank you for this conversation we had today, for people like Brad they're courageous enough to stand up and speak, talk about struggles, talk about the things that really we all go through from time to time in our own ways. But unfortunately, we are not able to face sometimes. We're not able to talk about it. And the fact of the matter is we can help others when we do. So I thank you for bringing him on today and letting him share stories that I know will help other people. I thank you for the work he continues to do to help the people that are out there every single day putting their lives on the line to keep the rest of us safe. I thank you for the ones that are actually doing the work. Thank you for our first responders. Thank you for our military veterans and our active duty. Thank you for their families and their support systems, the ones that they have at home that lift them up in prayer every day and are there for them day and night. I thank you for the work that we're able to do to help those people. I thank you for your hand being in the work at all times. And I pray that we give you the praise, the honor, and the glory for all the good that happens, because it all comes only from you. And we pray this in the name of your precious Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.